Hello, welcome back to another video. Today I'm doing my 15.1 ADC tier list. So, for your content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. This is a new season, so we saw a bunch of changes. We have a new objective, a couple of system changes, primarily the minion one has had a pretty big impact on the game. We saw a new item, doesn't really affect the bot lane role, but yeah, there are things which change. So let's get into the tier list. The D tier is going to consist of 3 champions at the moment. That is Smolder, Tristana, and Samira. These 3 champions I would highly recommend avoiding in their current state. Smolder is probably the worst of the 3. He is going to be buffed in 15.2. In Samira and Tristana's case, they've just been struggling for a bit. Both these champions obviously were collector rushers, and that item got nerfed and is in a bit of a worse spot at the moment, especially with a lot of champions in the game picking up a lot of armor. Overall, crit marksmen look to be the biggest losers of this patch in their current state. On-hit marksmen are doing a bit better, and if you can opt into lethality, that can definitely be a route there for you as well. But these 3 champions, definitely my biggest underperformers at the moment. All 3 could probably do with a bit of a buff to kind of push them back into the ADC spotlight. The C tier then is going to consist of some elite skewed plus some just slightly weaker marksmen at the moment. In Aphelios' case, I don't think the champion's per se bad. I think he will definitely benefit from Yoon Towers being buffed next patch. That should incentivize it as being his first item. He is obviously someone who builds collector a lot of the time as well, and that has definitely caused him to struggle a bit more. Overall, the champion, if you can pilot it well, is in a spot where you can still pick him. I wouldn't recommend him over the meta if you are picking him up for like the first time. I mean, I wouldn't even really recommend this champion even if he was meta as like a first time champion, as he does have a lot of different mechanics to a lot of the other champions, with weapon rotations being a very big thing on him. The other C-tier champions are the likes of Xayah, who still, I mean, Xayah and Kai'Sa, I actually pair these 2 champions together. Both these 2 picks are seeing competitive play at the moment, so they are champions which people will perceive as being a bit more viable in solo queue. They are a bit conditional, which is why they traditionally end up being a bit stronger in competitive. The likes of Xayah is very good into dive and into picks which really just want to play into her, being able to utilize her self-peeling tools and having a lot of value with a root in her kit. She traditionally doesn't output as much DPS unless given a lot of gold as some of the more traditional marksmen, but you can still definitely find angles to really solo carry on this champion. Kai'Sa's case, she stayed relatively neutral to a bit power positive this patch. Obviously not going as many, not going as traditional marksman as a lot of the other picks within the lane. Like, she doesn't need the likes of the LDR. She can just go the static or Kraken into Ginsu's Nash's variant, which is relatively decent on her at the moment. Like, if you get the free item core, she is in a relatively decent spot. She's a pick which can oftentimes work in a lot of different compositions, acting as a DPS threat with poke and dive potential. I think the pick is slightly underrated at the moment, but she's still definitely weaker than where she has been in the past, which is why I have her in the C tier. I also believe she requires a bit more pilot power to really get the full potential out of this champion. Ashe is definitely a lot weaker this patch. She really lost a lot of power with the changes which she received, primarily focused on nerfing down her early game strength and trying to push it more towards like her late game. She's definitely doing a bit worse at the moment, and that has dropped her down substantially towards the C tier. I don't think she has the agency which she kind of needs to really be a pick, which I'd recommend in solo queue at the moment. Draven is very, very pilot driven. He can stomp games if you give him a lot of gold. He can also be a liability and struggle if you're just not getting the kills and the your adoration cash outs. That is where this champion really does struggle. But yeah, if you I like confident in your ability to snowball games, you're really playing for like those early feats and like sieging, and yeah, you're closing out games quickly. He can be a really potent pick. Obviously, going to support a high ban rate. Most champions which are traditionally stronger laners are going to be within that boat of, yeah, supporting higher ban rates. Lucian is in a pretty rough spot at the moment. I'd also have him towards the lower part of the C tier. He can still definitely work, especially if you pair him with things which can like utilize his passive. The likes of Nami obviously is the one which will come to people's minds, but there are other pairings which can definitely enable him to be a bit stronger. I think if you take the right pairings with him, he can probably bump up to the B tier. I still think he's in a pretty rough spot though at the moment. really playing around like his mid-game kind of like damage and his ability to just push people off with his ultimate. The other C tier champions then, actually there's only one more, and that is Kalista. Kalista is probably the best competitive / elite pick in the game at the moment. She is still one of the hardest champions to play within the game, having a very, very unique mechanic on her passive, combined with reliance on like your support playing around like your W rotation and your ultimate. She is the perfect competitive pick. Not really a champion which I'd recommend just like playing in solo queue if you are like looking to hit master, which is kind of what this tier list is targeted towards, like average brackets. She's just not quite there as an option, even though she's definitely doing a lot better at the moment. I would say if you want to learn Kalista, she's probably one of the best spots for learning her, but she's still not going to net you as good results as some of the other options in the tier above, unless you obviously have put the games into her and you have a lot of mastery on the champion. Jhin is going to be my first champion within the B tier. He could arguably be dropped down to the C tier. He's definitely doing a lot worse at the moment. The champion obviously received a couple of targeted nerfs towards the end of last split, as he'd been overperforming for a while. People had like caught onto this champion's strengths, and I believe he saw a decent amount of presence at Worlds, if my memory serves me correctly. Since then, the champion's definitely been on the decline. He now sits as like a B tier option. He is a pick which I'd actually just recommend avoiding unless you're very comfortable on him and you're really playing around like specific aspects of his kit. Zoe, doing a bit better at the moment, will be a champion which really benefits from Yutau's being buffed next patch. She sits as like a low B tier option at the moment, but is definitely someone worth keeping your eyes on. I think she can function across all brackets, albeit you do need to pilot the champion well to like maximize DPS and get a lot of value out of her like different mechanic within her kit, being a Q as skill shot as being like your main output of DPS. Yasuo sits within the B tier, traditionally obviously does a lot better within the bot lane than other roles, traditionally also one of his less popular roles, but as a pick, he still functions like where you'd want him to function. He's a bit on the weaker side at the moment, just generalistically. I think with Yutau's being buffed, he could also maybe swap over to the item. It'll be interesting to see. But you can still obviously just go V-Bork, like shield bow variant, and you should still find a level of success into specific marksmen and with specific pairings. I think he could sit as like a low B tier option, but he could really like flip depending on what like composition you're picking him into and what you're pairing him with, and obviously how well you pilot the champion. Twitch is doing better after his buffs. Obviously they looked like a joke on paper, like it was a slight bit of Q attack speed and duration, but it was nice, combined with the fact that champions which build Bork are doing a bit better this patch. Twitch has found himself within the B tier. Obviously people are going to be pretty frustrated about this. I could see the argument for dropping him down to the C tier. He still has some of the same vulnerabilities, and he's still not outputting like insane amounts of damage. But if you are fed on Twitch, this champion can be quite a powerful pick. Obviously a frustration champion as well, having Viz and then the ability to just sneak up on someone and output a decent chunk of damage. Twitch, I think, belongs in the B tier. Now, Sivir is an interesting one. I would say she went from being underrated to kind of just where she should be. Like, she sits as like a B tier champion at the moment. I think she will also be another champion which benefits from Yutau's being buffed. She can obviously opt into things like Essence Reaver or the other one, Static Shiv, that's the one. Still function well. Like if you give her the gold, she'll eventually scale up and just output a huge amount of DPS, being able to spread like W's across the enemy team, being able to like tag people with the Q. She's a fine champion, and I think if you enjoy Sivir at the moment, then she's definitely something you can opt into. She's obviously a bit safer than some of the other marksman option. Just being able to sit back, clear waves from a long distance gives her that safety net. So she is going to also be within my B tier. Varus I have in the B tier at the moment. This champion also, like, kind of like Kalista, I'll probably like tag them with the highlighter at the end of this video, are two champions which are incredibly good elite picks. They have been for a long time, and even Ashe within like a relatively close / similar bracket. Varus has great pick potential with his ultimate. His long range harass is very, very hard for a lot of champions to deal with. Obviously you have the fallback pattern of playing on hit Varus, which is traditionally a bit better within solo queue, as people won't consistently allow you to drop the lethality damage down, and it is a bit less agency than the pure on hit, which gives you a lot of carry potential. Overall, Varus, I think, yeah, scales incredibly well with rank and as a champion, which I would recommend most people pick up at some point, but sits as more like a B tier champion for like average brackets. Ezreal and Vayne wrap up the B tier. Ezreal still a champion which scales with how well you pilot the pick. Like if you have a lot of mastery and like you pilot Ezreal well, he is an incredible champion, and he is a excellent pick for anyone's like ADC Arsenal. Obviously, if you can't pilot the champion well, he's not necessary. You can opt into other marksmen and still find success. But Ezreal, his safety net, his ability to do damage from long range, his different playstyle just enable him to kind of withstand most metas as an ADC champion. And I'd have him as a B tier option. Vayne, I had him the A tier, and I still think she could probably be an A tier option. I've spoken to a lot of people. I've spoken to like specific people about like the strengths of Vayne. Obviously, she has the limitations of being like shorter range than other marksmen. Obviously still has 550 range, auto attack range, which is relatively standard for most marksmen, but doesn't have the like same abilities / kit to kind of like deal with like the wave clear and the pushback a lot of champions have. I think if you get this pick out of lane, she's an incredibly valuable marksman, has great tank kit. She has great tank side lane capabilities. I think this pick is underrated in her current state and could definitely be bumped up to the A tier if things shift around, but I have her as a high B tier option. Honestly, if you pilot Vayne well, you should probably be playing the pick at the moment. If you're not comfortable with a champion, she's not necessary. I think she just has decent spots which she can be played in at the moment. Caitlyn sits within the A tier. She could probably be interchangeable with the B tier as well. She's incredibly popular at the moment. The most popular marksman, I believe, in like gold plus brackets. Obviously, her range, her scaling, her oppressive laning phase, albeit not as oppressive as it has been in like previous iterations. Just give her a lot of merit. I think the one problem with Caitlyn is the necessity to like siege and utilize your range can often put her in a lot of vulnerability. And some of Caitlyn's power lies outside of Caitlyn. Like if people play around you, then this champion gets just innately more stronger. Compared to, most marksmen do. Like, that is just a very marksman trait. Like, if you play around your marksman, they will be able to output more DPS. And I really do recommend people, like, still do that, even if marksmen are perceived as being weaker at the moment. Caitlyn, yeah, I still think can be volatile to an extent. Like, if you extend, you're not using your vision correctly, your team aren't, like, really moving and responding to you, she does fall down. And I would say she does fall down a bit more aggressively than some of the other picks, but she sits in the A tier at the moment. I still think the champion can be really valuable in the correct spots. Nyla is a conditional A tier pick. I think Nyla with the correct pairings is one of the best marksmen in the game. She's very hard to kill and outputs a huge amount of damage if you're pairing her with the likes of Tarek. I think if you pair her with other things, she can definitely lose a lot of power. She's a bit more conditional in composition. Like, you don't want to be playing her into like a ton of mages with self-peeling tools that can hurt her quite a bit, but her ability to sustain fight with like tools like Conqueror, her built-in armor pen, just gives her a lot of innate tank killing capability, and I think it holds her up as being like a solid A tier pick at the moment. So the other A tier picks, this is going to be a string of mages. Ziggs is a great artillery siege option, definitely something which I would recommend playing, as he tends to be one of the more traditional mainstay mages within the bot lane. Swain is a great anti-tank / good against health pool champion, where if they don't if enemy team doesn't have the tools to kill you, he's a great option within those spots. He does struggle a bit more into the range of some of the marksmen, plus his armor has been nerfed more recently, and that is one of his clear weaknesses, but I do still think the champ is very good in specific spots. Sits as more like a low A tier option. Ziggs, like, good for artillery, good for sieging. Swain, good into tanky compositions. Karthus, not doing as well at the moment in the bot lane. Still a decent pick though. Like, if you give Karthus a lot of gold, he will nuke enemy teams, combined with the fact that it looks like people should be shifting over towards like Summonary with Axiom Arcanist as being one of the main key runes, one of the main runes he should be running. It should pop him back up. Dark Harvest obviously doing a lot weaker with the removal of Eyeball Collection. That did hurt Karthus quite a bit. So I do believe that is where he has lost some of his power. But yeah, First Strike or Summonary, both these look like very solid options at the moment. So definitely do try them out. Brand, Still very common with Nami pairing. I think it's like 4 times his next most common pairing. Can function with other things. Like, he is not locked to the Nami pairing, but it is what you are going to traditionally want to play him with. He does better in lower MMR brackets, so you can't really pilot this champion as easily in higher brackets, and becomes a bit more dependent on Nami. But I still have him as a solid A tier pick, especially like for average and lower MMRs. Veigar sits within the A tier, still has incredible scaling. If you can get past his weaker early game, there is a lot of value to this champion. The cage is a very powerful CC tool. The amount of damage burst this champion can output is very high, very solid A tier option. Yeah, traditionally, once again, does better in low MMR brackets, with the likes of Brand. Cassiopeia will probably drop down to the B tier after her nerfs coming in next patch. She really benefited from the buff she got given to kind of compensate for the fact that she doesn't build shoes for feeds. She's gained popularity within the bot lane because of this. I mean, Cassiopeia is probably the strongest flex option you have access to at the moment, being solid in the bot lane. It's still probably her weakest role. A very good mid laner, probably the premier mid laner, and a very good top laner, one of the best options you have accessible to you. She's not really blindable, she still struggles into range, but she definitely has a lot of good spots at the moment. Seraphine and Lux are my other 2 mages here. In Lux's case, she has a lot of burst damage, a lot of wave clear, and very good gold scaling. Those are the main key factors of playing Lux. Plus the utility on her W and like the CC/slows she has access to are nice tools. I think this champion, if you pilot her well and you give her the gold she needs, is an incredible pick. Needs for gold though. Like, if you don't get gold on this champion, she really does struggle like damage output wise compared to some of the other options. Seraphine is a bit more utility centric. Obviously the ultimate is an incredibly powerful tool. The W giving healing and shielding is also very potent. She works really nicely with compositions which want to like cluster and play together. She can output a lot of utility, and that can really give her a lot of value at the moment. You're not picking her for damage, unlike some of the other mage options here, but her utility makes up for that damage she has. She doesn't output compared to some of the other options. Kog'Maw sits within the A tier. AP Kog'Maw is basically gone at this point. This is just traditional standard AD on-hit Kog'Maw. This is the Bork Ginsu's, or Ginsu's Rush. There are different variants I've seen of Kog'Maw being played at the moment, and then Runan's is like a 3rd slot traditionally. He's in a good spot at the moment. I'd have him as an A tier option, outputting a huge amount of DPS, pairs really nicely with a lot of support. Not locked to Lulu by any means, albeit a nice pairing for him, being being able to output like shielding, having really good peeling tools with like the polymorph and the ultimate. He's in a good spot at the moment. He's a very solid A tier pick, and definitely someone I would recommend trying out. Obviously not mandatory, but yeah, in a good A tier pick. Corki is a bit more, I don't want to say mandatory. I think this champion is a very strong laner, and if you're like, everyone should traditionally have a strong laner within their champion pool, whether that's like Draven or Corki, for example. Both these champions are very oppressive laning phases. Kalista, Ashe, other examples. But yeah, Corki, very easy. I mean, Corki's one of the easier lane bullies to play. Like, he is a lot more accessible for the average player base. Definitely a pick I'd recommend learning at the moment. And he sits as like a solid A tier option. He does quite aggressively fall off compared to a lot of the other picks. But yeah, if you can utilize the power of this champion's wave clear, early game damage, he is a very potent pick. So I do believe he's a very deserving A tier champion. And then we have Jinx, who is still a very good hyper carry option. Not quite suffered as much as some of the other crit marksmen at the moment. She's probably the best crit option you have accessible to you. Give her a lot of gold, allow her to snowball, and she'll be a very valuable pick within the game. If you peel for her, yeah, she has great carry potential at the moment. And then the S tier, Hui and Victor make up my 2 AP options. In Victor's case, he's being nerfed in 15.2 and will probably drop down to the A tier. If not, I imagine over time fade out of the bot lane. He's a very solid S tier pick at the moment, a 3-way flex. Obviously top lane is for the most part very conditional, but mid lane and bot lane Victor, very strong picks at the moment. His ability to clear waves, his ability to output a huge amount of damage, his gold scaling, there's just a lot of things really going for him at the moment. His rune options are relatively creative. Like, you can go things like the grass with Summonary. I mean, bot lane, you are traditionally probably playing Summonary, running like running that kind of like rune tree. But yeah, Victor, great S tier pick at the moment. Hui is my a bit more niche, but I still think incredibly strong champion at the moment. His wave clear, his ability to he's not as level dependent as some of the other major options, which is why I think he can function a bit more here. His CC, but yeah, like the range is very valuable on him, and I think he's also a very good mid laner in his current state. Both these champions, if you want to play them, like if you're queuing mid ADs, mid bot lane, you can play both of them there, and I think that is a very, very powerful tool to have at the moment, especially when you do get autofilled every so often. And then MF is my premier marksman of the patch. This is Lethality MF. This is the First Strike Yomu's variant. It's in a very solid spot at the moment. I don't think there's a definitive marksman pick at the moment. I just think MF stands a slight tier above, with the fact that she's a bit easier to play, has a bit more safety with the amount of ability range she has, synergizes really well with like engage support. You don't really want to play over an enchanter. She can really struggle in those situations. I say that, like, Janna can function more with MF, as Janna gives an AD steroid, and MF really values AD quite heavily. But like some of the more traditional enchanters, she can definitely struggle a bit more with. But overall, yeah, MF, really good spot at the moment. Easy to play. My pick of the patch. If you're looking for like elite slash high elo skewed picks, I'd recommend the likes of Varus, Kalista. Ashe still seems to have some prevalence, but I imagine that will fade away over time. Corki, obviously still a very popular elite skewed pick. If you're looking for things which are a bit easier, the likes of MF, Corki also falls into that bracket, even though he's like played an elite as like an early game, like really impressive early game bully. He's also relatively easy to play, so Corki falls in both. I'd say he's in a very good spot to play at the moment. And the likes of, I think Zeri might be on the rise, but like Caitlyn can, albeit like requires a bit more like vision and like teamwork to kind of coordinate around the champion. It's in a solid spot, and like she's very popular, so I imagine most people are going to be playing her. But those are my thoughts, so thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.